Which Genshin Impact characters are unpopular and why? Let's talk about it. First, Aloy. Self-explanatory. I'm not counting that as my first point though. Let's start with Freminet. One of the biggest, if not the biggest reason why people didn't use him very much is that his kit is centered around an aspect of Genshin that is hardly used. Physical. Even though you can use him as a cryo DPS, a lot of his kit is targeted towards using him as a physical DPS. He can use Slice Shatter, and he can use the elemental reaction Superconduct, because he's cryo. However, physical damage is pretty neglected in Genshin. Aside from Mika, who can be used to buff physical damage, as well as having a single elemental reaction for physical, there's not a lot to work with. This is because elemental reactions steal the spotlight instead. Elemental reactions like Vaporize, Melt, and Hyperbloom are like the flashy fireworks of Genshin combats. If we focus our attention to Vaporize and Melt as an example, they multiply damage in exciting ways. Unfortunately, physical damage just doesn't have that. It lacks these juicy reactions. Another reason why Freminet isn't used is because there's already a premium physical DPS who's been in the game for a long time. Eula. While she, as well as cryo units as a whole, don't get many reruns, she's known as the go-to physical DPS for those who want to use it. So people would rather wait to invest into Eula than build a lower tier physical DPS like Freminet. Xinyan's kit is weird. It feels like Hoyoverse didn't know what role to give her, so she ended up being a weird hybrid of things. You see, for starters, she is a victim of split scaling. So while she wants attack for her damage, she also wants defense for her shield. This makes her a bit confusing to build. If you build her with attack, then the shield portion of her kit is pretty much made redundant. And if you build her shield up, it's just not worth it, since her shield isn't very strong no matter how much defense you put on her. So why she even has a shield in the first place is strange when you think about it. And what's even weirder is that her 4th Ascension passive boosts her physical damage depending on her shield's uptime, but her shield really has no uptime because of how weak it is. Also, she faces a similar issue to Freminet, whereby she can be used as a physical unit, but taking it a step further, she's pyro, so it would take quite a bit of effort to utilize the one elemental reaction Genshin has for physical damage than if she was cryo or electro instead. Dori is more of a support unit than a DPS, but she's still hardly used. TLDR, she's like a jack of all trades, but master of none, sort of deal. Firstly, she has high energy requirements. Now, if you're going to incorporate Dori into a team, her elemental burst is key, but it requires a lot of energy, making her dependent on high energy recharge stats. In fact, she will need about 200% energy recharge on her. Also, like we said before, she lacks personal damage. She doesn't contribute much in terms of her own damage to teams, which can be a drawback if your team needs more DPS. And finally, and probably her biggest downfall, competition. Other Electro 4-star characters like Fischl and Qiqi Shinobu generally outperform Dori, so many players would rather stick to using those characters rather than building up a new, more underwhelming Electro units. Sayu is a pretty fun unit to use. She's pretty top tier for exploration and she can provide decent heals. However, many players don't use her when it comes to combat. It's a little hard to justify using Sayu for combat purposes when many, if not all, other anime units in the game are more useful combat-wise. Most of them can group up enemies, making it easier to take control in battle. Xiao doesn't do that, but he's a DPS unit, and Xinyan has her own advantages. Sayu's gimmick is that she can turn into the equivalent of Sonic and can provide heals with her burst. It's nothing groundbreaking, so people would rather invest into better units for combat. If you have Farina, maybe you can try utilizing Sayu's burst since she can provide team-wide healing, but Sayu has high energy requirements. So while it's not a bad idea to invest into Sayu for overworld purposes, she serves no purpose for endgame contents like Spiral Abyss or the theatre. Ninggaung is a Geo DPS, and if you invest into her, she can do nice damage. I know she carried me during my lower AR days. However, her playstyle is clunky, and her role as a Geo DPS has been overshadowed by the likes of Ito and Navia. But back to the gameplay thing. Ninggaung's playstyle isn't the easiest to master. it requires a balanced use of her normal and charge attacks. Her charge attack especially is pretty slow, which sucks because it's integral to use until you get her elemental burst up. That's really all there is to it. Her gameplay is just really clunky and slow. People would much prefer using an easier to use Geo DPS like Ito and Navia, leaving Ninggaung to serve the role of activating Geo resonance in the team, if that at all. This video is sponsored by Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. Tokyo Treat is a fun and exclusive Japanese snack box featuring unique and exclusive flavors from all around Japan. Each box is filled with a variety of full-sized, fun and exclusive Japanese snack items, like unique Kit Kats, uniquely flavored Japanese chips, and occasional Japanese sodas that are only available in Japan for a limited time. Sakura Co is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local Japanese snack makers, with each box coming with 20 traditional, authentic and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and a special Japanese tableware. This month's Tokyo Treat theme is Snacktastic Halloween. Spooky month is pretty much upon us, and so Tokyo Treat wanted to bring you a taste of Japan's unique take on Halloween through the power of snacking. From this month's box, I enjoyed the Kit Kat apple pie and the Halloween pizza puffs. This month's Sakura Co theme is Colors of Kyoto. Kyoto, situated in the heart of Japan, is a city full of immense historical significance, where World Heritage sites intertwine with nature's ever-changing seasons. As autumn sweeps across this enchanting city, Kyoto is painted in warm hues of crimson and gold, and autumn unfolds like an artistic masterpiece. This month, enjoy the simple pleasure of sipping tea, savor flavors that resonate with nature, and allow each delicacy to evoke the spirit of Kyoto's rich heritage. From this box, I greatly enjoyed the matcha cream roll cookie and the kitsune senbei, so click the link in the description or the pinned comment to get $5 off your first box if you use my code. And once again, thank you Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co for sponsoring this video. Many people like Candace because of her design. Her kit, however, not so much. Candace offers something unique. Hydra infusion. Normal attacks are able to get infused with Hydra after she uses her elemental burst, but this ability isn't universally needed. She can be used in very niche instances like Ayato, Nilou or Arlecchino teams, but she's hardly a best in slot character for these particular teams. And even in these teams, especially for Nilou and Arlecchinos, having C6 is crucial. Overall, Candace does have her uses, but she's pretty niche and she's high investment. Qiqi is another case of the jack of all trades, master of none concept. Qiqi is a nice healer, but her abilities have really long cooldowns, and her cryo application isn't as good as other characters. She also needs a lot of energy recharge, since her energy regeneration is less than average to say the least. It's only at her C1 that she's able to regenerate energy particles, and no one likes losing their 50-50. And unless you get lucky on the standard banner, losing your 50-50 is the only way to get Qiqi. So most likely, you probably won't build her out of spite. Apart from Dendro, the Traveler's kits for each of the elements are pretty meh. At the time of recording this, we do not have Pyro or Cryo Traveler, but let's go over each of the Traveler's elemental powers. In terms of Animo Traveler, while they can crowd control and swirl, Animo Traveler isn't the top pick for damage outputs. Other anime characters like Xiao, Wanderer, and even Heizo outshined Traveler in terms of raw damage. In terms of crowd control, there are better options like Kazuha, Venti, and Sucrose. While Geo Traveler does do more damage than Animo Traveler, Geo in general is a pretty unpopular element anyway. Traveler can at least help in an Ito team if you're lacking Geo characters, and can be a good battery. However, players find their Geo constructs to be a bit obnoxious. Like Geo, Electro Traveler can be a great battery for characters who need energy. However, Traveler needs to use their normal and charge attacks to utilize their full potential as a battery. Electro Traveler can only offer themselves to be a battery though, since their actual damage in this state isn't great. Dendro Traveler is the most well-received Traveler. Their damage isn't too shabby, and they're overall a great asset to have in Dendro teams, especially if you're lacking Dendro characters. Dendro Traveler, however, does need a lot of energy because their ult is incredibly important to use in this state, but other than that, Dendro Traveler is fairly decent. Hydro Traveler isn't great. First of all, they stand still during their elemental skill, which means they're completely vulnerable during this time, since there's no interruption resistance. Their burst is just weird, the damage of it isn't great, and just another example of how messy Hydro Traveler is, there's healing as well, but healing is only available when they're at C6, and the healing effect doesn't even scale with the Traveler's HP, but with the HP of the member being healed. Jack, why are you here? Mika can potentially be used with Freminet because of his healing, but everything else about him is interesting. Mika's elemental skill is his primary source of damage, but his damage just isn't good. So first of all, he is not worth playing as a damage dealer. Instead, and initially, the Genshin community thought Mika was a support for Eula, but their synergy is questionable to say the least. Mika's attack speed buff is nice for other characters like Ayato and Wanderer, but Eula has her own rhythm and doesn't synergize well with this buff. Plus, if you're looking for a cryo applicator, Mika isn't it, since his cryo application isn't good either. And finally, let's talk about his physical buff. Like we said at the beginning of the video, physical is neglected by Hoyoverse, so investing into a physical support unit isn't what players need 99.999% of the time, since there's no good elemental reaction for physical damage. Plus, the way Mika buffs physical isn't just a tap of a button like Kudasara with Electro, Shenhe for Cryo, and Farazan for Anemo. It's more complex, which doesn't exactly make him a cozy support to use, even if you wanted to try and invest into a physical DPS unit. Listen, I've met a fair share of Amber mains in my time, but since the beginning of the game, she's always been viewed by the broader Genshin community as a character who's just not that great. Amber is just weak since her damage isn't great, and unlike other 4-stars, where their C6s are the easiest to get, not including Traveler, Amber, Kaya and Lisa face the issue where they are never put on banners, making their constellations rarer to come by than a literal C6 R5 limited 5-star character. Even when characters are viable with just their C0, C6 is always great to have regardless of the character. So having it be such a difficult task for these 3 characters is just a shame. And of course, Pyro is littered with incredible DPSs, which adds to the reason for not playing Amber. Kaya can be used for cryo application, Lisa can be used for electro application, but Amber has always been power crept as a pyro damage dealing unit by other pyro damage dealing units. While she's beloved by the community, she is hated by Hoyoverse apparently.